name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Book. So this is always my favorite video to film. As soon as I film one, I start looking up covers for the next installment. This is my US versus UK book cover video. I just love to look at art of any kind, and obviously book covers are art, and I have ended up following a lot of really talented artists through doing these videos, and that's my favorite thing about it. So when I can, because sometimes it can be difficult to find a cover artist, and sometimes there's just a cover designer, they use stock images and things like that, but when I find an artist that I like and want to point out to you, I will mention them and I will leave their links down below. I already did a version of this for 2024 releases, so if you are thinking of some covers that I didn't include in this video, they might be in that one, so check that one out. And I'm sure there'll be enough covers to do a part 3 of this whole thing, because I'm coming across a lot of books releasing this year that have different covers for the US and the UK. I just think it's really interesting to compare them and to see which one appeals to you more. I should go back and check who is winning overall. I think I've done 3 or 4 of these videos so far, and it's one of those things where I always think that the UK is gonna win, but somehow the US does. So maybe I do like US covers more than I think I do, and I notice that in the comments a lot of you say the same thing. So as always, I'm going to pin a comment down below with just the titles of all the books I'm gonna talk about today. You can copy and paste that into the comments and let me know which is your favorite. You can put a little flag emoji beside each one as an easy way to tell me which one is your favorite. And we're just gonna jump into this because I have quite a few and I'm already starting to collect some for my next installment. And if you ever come across any, feel free to DM me on Instagram. It's just Kristen Craves Books. I love that. You all have been amazing. I have started to do pre-order campaigns for my monthly release videos, and you all send me stuff when you come across it. I love that. So if you do come across books that have different covers, 2024 releases in particular, let me know. Send me the links, and that's always so helpful, and I appreciate you all so much. Starting off with a book that's getting a lot of attention right now. It just came out, and the story itself is supposed to be amazing, but the covers are so beautiful, and this is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. There's no denying that the US version is stunning. I haven't seen it in person yet. That is the one that is available here in Canada, and I'm sure all of that gold is foiled and really beautiful, but if you've watched some of my other videos, you know how much I love Tom Roberts as an illustrator. He has done some of my favorite covers, including The Book That Wouldn't Burn and its sequel, and God Killer, and he is the artist for the UK edition of The Tainted Cup. These are giving very, very different vibes, especially in terms of color palette. What I like about the US one is that ivy that's growing along the sides of it. I think that is an interesting touch, but I have learned that I'm a sucker for mushrooms on the cover. This isn't the only cover on this list that will have mushrooms on it. That seems to be a trend that I am falling for and appreciating. And I also just like the color palette of the UK edition. I think it's different from anything else that I own. That big pop of pink or coral in the middle with those shades of blue are around. It's just very eye-catching, and there's something a little bit more haunting and eerie about the UK cover, which is just more of my vibe. Though I will say that I prefer the font choices on the US cover. I love that The Tainted Cup, the title, is in that scroll. I think that's a nice touch, and it kind of gives you an idea of what to expect from the book itself. Both stunning, but of course I have to give the point to the UK just because it's done by one of my favorite illustrators, who's obviously getting a lot of attention lately because his covers seem to be everywhere these days, and he's instantly recognizable for me, and I adore his work. So there you go, one for the UK. Then we have The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. Very interesting covers. Something that I've noticed is that in the UK, they tend to make the title on a cover bolder, and you can instantly tell what book it is, and I think that is probably a smart choice, and that is very much true on this cover. It's white, it's large, you instantly can read it. I actually love that they put, I think it's a violin, in the O of a ghost. I think that is an interesting touch. I prefer the red font on the US one. I just think that that is more interesting than the white. But in terms of readability, the UK one definitely catches your attention first. Well, the UK one is pretty. There's no denying that. It does feel like something I've seen before, especially in the UK, where you have some kind of filigree around the border of the cover, and you have the characters there as well. I'm curious to see if that will be gold foiling, because if it is, that would be stunning. I actually like the background on it, that it looks like a galaxy or a sky. I think that is intriguing with some stars around it. It's not telling me much about the book itself though, and having read the synopsis, I'm definitely leaning more towards the US one. I love that gold frame. I think that is unique, and the fact that it takes up a large majority of the cover, and then you're focused on those hands in the middle. That is such a simple image, but somehow it is haunting. And I know that this is a Canadian book, or it's based partly in Canada because our main character comes back to Halifax, and my cat's here cooing. And it is a war novel. I think it's loosely based on World War I, and if you are at all familiar with Canadian history, poppies are a big part of World War I, and I know that part of the book takes place in Flanders. So that poppy image is iconic and instantly recognizable to me. So I'm gonna have to give the point to the US one because A, I think it's more unique. It tells me more about this story, and I just like the red font. Now let's talk about Compass and Blade. This is what I'm torn on, and I'm curious to see what you all think about this one. The US cover, in theory, is the one that I would gravitate towards more because it's more whimsical. I like the blue color palette. I like that we have those two characters on there. They seem to be falling. I like the illustration style of the waves, but I do like the drawing and the illustration on the UK cover. I think that it's something different. I like that we have that depth. You'll hear me say this all the time. I love when a book cover has some depth and it's not just a flat image and you see that ship in the distance. Again, I think it tells you a lot about what is going on in the story itself. But now that I'm looking at it, the US one, the cross in the A is a dagger, and that kind of wins me over quite a bit. So I think that's an interesting touch as well. And the one thing that I don't love about the UK cover is not the font choice, but the ombre effect on it, especially with that pink and yellow. I don't know that that's exactly working for me. It's something that I would have done on like Printmaster when I was a kid or something. That is just what it's giving me. But the illustration itself is quite stunning. And actually the illustrator for the UK edition is Nico Delort, who you might not recognize at the moment, but I have a feeling you will in the future because they're actually illustrating the new version of the Hunger Games. It's an illustrated edition that I think comes out in October. I'm gonna leave a link to that down below if you want to check out the style. And now that I know that, that makes a lot of sense. I can see some of that inspiration into this cover as well. So as much as I like the illustrative style of that, it's just some of the other choices on the cover, the font in particular, that isn't my favorite, and I'm just more of a whimsical person, and there's something about the US one that really draws my eye, and there's no denying that the dagger through the A is clever. So I'm gonna give it to the US one, but I'm really curious to see where everybody else falls with that one, so let me know. Okay, I was introduced to these two covers months ago, and I've been waiting to film this video to have enough books for it because we need to talk about this situation. This is someone you can build a nest in, and honestly this book sounds amazing. It's definitely one I want to read, but these two covers are so completely different, give completely different vibes, make you think they are in completely different genres, but in two genres I love. So it's hard for me to decide. It's actually one of these situations where if I absolutely adore this book, I could see myself having both copies because very different vibes, but I am into them both. So the US one is giving me horror. That witch's face is so simple but so creepy and effective, and then you have the tentacles coming out, the chains, but then that you throw in the hearts around there, and so it's giving horror with a love story, which I think actually is what this book is about. That red really pops with the black and the touches of yellow. And actually I just followed the artist on Instagram. It's James Fenner. I will leave a link down below, and this looks very much like what he does. These kind of cutesy but creepy characters within this color palette, it tends to be black, red, with pops of blue actually, but I think this choice of artist for the cover really works given what I know about this story. I do think it leans more horror with the romance as far as I can tell. I cannot wait to read it, so I think there's something really special and unique about that, and the way you have the title in the witch's outfit like that with the main character underneath looking up, I just think everything about that is effective. And then you have the imagery like the spiders and the skulls that add to the eeriness of it, and then again you throw in those hearts, so I just think that's kind of a fun cover and kind of campy. And then my cozy fantasy loving heart obviously adores the UK edition. It's the one that I'm gonna choose, just to let you know, because it just is so perfect to me. It kind of reminds me of the cover for Queen of Blood. It's got such a softness to it. It looks like they did the illustration and then they put some kind of film filter over it to make it a little bit softer and not so sharp, and it's beautiful. I love everything about it. You can tell that the main characters are in some kind of a romance and there's some kind of monster thing going on. One of the characters has a tail. Again, I love depth, and this has a lot of depth where we see them standing in the foreground with the trees, and then in the distance they're pointing to this castle. There's a lot of fog happening. I love the soft color palette. It's just like my perfect cover. And I believe the artist for this one is Stephen Player. I couldn't find them on Instagram, so I will continue looking for them if they do have one. But I believe that they have worked on some of Terry Pratchett's books in the past, which makes a lot of sense given what I know about this book. Apologize if the angle changed, my card memory filled up, but as I was saying, this could be a case where when I read the story, the UK cover might be perfect fit for it, or vice versa. It's hard to tell. They could both work, and this might be cozy fantasy horror. Who knows? And if that's true, those are my two favorite genres. With some romance, my top 3 favorite genres. So this could be my perfect book with my perfect covers. It's hard to say, but I gotta give it to the UK in this case. Then we have some more horror, and this is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, which is quite the title, and these are interesting covers. The UK one is effective, I think. It's giving literary fiction. I feel like there's been a lot of weird literary fiction lately that has really been hitting for a lot of people, and I want to read more of, that has this kind of art style. It's more graphic, it's more flat, but there's something strange about it. Obviously, it's somebody eating an eyeball, and the title is The Eyes Are the Best Part, so you can kind of put two and two together of what is happening here. And the eyeball is not realistic. It's more of a flat image, and it just screams literary fiction to me. I think you know the kind of covers and books that I'm talking about. And then when you look at the US cover, it's not quite a realistic eye, but it's leaning more towards realism. And I can't deny that I love that the eye is with chopsticks, that somebody is using chopsticks to eat an eyeball. I think that is a super effective image, something so unique and different and so subtle in its eeriness. And I prefer the blue background. We have that ombre effect. This is a case where the title is larger and more poppy on the US cover, which is something I don't see as much. It's definitely more subtle on the UK edition, and I just love the US one. I think the US one is perfect. There's nothing I would change about it, and it's like nothing else I've ever seen, so I gotta give it to the US in this case. This next one I think is going to be hard for all of us to choose, because I sat and stared at these two covers and had a hard time, and that is These Deathless Shores. It's by P.H. Lowe, and if you can't tell by these two covers, it is a Peter Pan retelling. I think it's a Captain Hook origin story. Now, I never loved Peter Pan, but I love Peter Pan retellings. I don't know why. So I will be picking these up, and I can't deny that's partly influenced by these covers because they're so pretty, and I'm somebody who judges a book by their cover. Obviously, that is the whole purpose of this video. We are going through book covers, so that is who I am. And this is another case where I think that the US cover is more whimsical. It's definitely Peter Pan forward. You see all the characters on here. You see Captain Hook's hook on top of that mountain. The ship is on both covers, and there's just something about that ship that is instantly recognizable. And the UK one does give you Peter Pan, because if you look in the O and Shore, Tinkerbell is in there, so I think I do like that subtlety. We're using the same colors in both covers, but just different tones, and I think the US one is capturing that whimsical nature better. And I like that we have these characters on here. I'm assuming this one is inspired by Wendy, the ship itself, and what I assume to be Tinkerbell. They have this translucence to them, like they're iridescent almost, and I think that is really good. I like the illustration, I just really do, and I like that the title is in the moon, but I also like on the UK one that they put the ship in the moon like that, and then what it looks like is it's a tentacle wrapping around the ship, which I think is really effective as well, and I do prefer the font choices on the UK one. So there's no denying that both illustrators are talented. The illustrators for the US version, they're actually twins. They're the Barbosa twins. I have to show you. I own something that they illustrated, and it's one of the most beautiful things I own. This is an illustrated edition of The Great Gatsby. I'm not sure that I've actually ever showed this on my channel before. This is the slipcover, and there is the cover, and you can kind of see the same kind of color palette that's on these Deathless Shores cover, and there are just beautiful illustrations throughout this. So I just wanted to shout this out, that I do own something that is illustrated by them, and I do think that they are really talented. But then Alison Claire Coleman is the artist for the UK cover, and this book is being published by Angry Robot Books in the UK, who I love, and they have sent me a few books, and it seems that this illustrator has worked on a lot of their books, and I own 2 of them, and they are some of the most beautiful books I own. So she did Evocation by S.D. Gibson, this ARC edition, and the final copy, and she also did The Bone Roots. So looking at their past work, it did not help me to choose a favorite because I love everything that they do. But then I just went with my gut on this one, and I'm going to give the point to the US just because it's more whimsical, and as I said, that's my vibe, and it's got more of the characters. It's just more recognizable, and I just like those translucent characters. I think that was an interesting touch, and I like the color palette a bit more. Both stunning, both incredible illustrators, fans of all their work. Moving on to The Night Ends with Fire, the US one is done by Victo Nye, and he also did Norse Mythology and Vicious by V. Schwab. So when you compare them, you put them all together, you can kind of see that that is all done by the same artist, and I really love that. I think the actual illustration itself is wonderful. This phoenix coming up I really like, but it's a color palette that stops me from absolutely loving this. It's just too much orange. That all of the details and the work that the artist put into creating this cover are kind of lost because it's just orange everywhere. And then the UK one is illustrated by Matthias Ball, and from what I can tell, this is the first book that he has done that isn't a children's book, which kind of makes sense why he would add more color into his cover. Not a ton of color, it is still a lot of orange, but adding those highlights and then that shade of teal or blue really makes sense, and it's more interesting to me, and it allows me to see the work that he's put into illustrating this dragon in greater detail. Another thing I've noticed in the UK versus the US is that the UK, they tend to put taglines on books more. I know that people don't really care about taglines, somehow I do. And this one says, Race to Obey, Destined to Rebel. And then the US one doesn't have one. So I'm gonna give it to the UK in this case, though I do think the illustrations of both are really pretty. It really came down to color choices for me on that one. This one's easy, because this is actually a prequel from Juno Dawson. This one is called Queen Bee. This is a prequel to, I don't know what the series is actually called, but the first book in the series is Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and we're getting this prequel here. And I've always much preferred the UK covers in this series, and there's no denying that there's a lot of great detail and a lot of interesting things happening in the US one. In this case, I really like a lot of what is being done here, and they both have that flat black background. I actually prefer some of the choices that they made in terms of font on the US one, but I just think that the UK one is always more interesting. They do something different. They kind of give you an idea of what the story is about. As much as I love a skull's been done many times before. It's not telling me anything about the story itself. I know that this is something to do with Anne Boleyn, so you're getting that more on the UK cover, and I do like the yellow and the hot pink on that black background, and you have the character in the middle there. It says Bow Down Witches. I just think I always prefer the UK covers in this series. This is no exception, so we got to give it to the UK. The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown is next, and in theory they're very similar in conception, but in execution they're very different. And I think I can say pretty easily that I prefer the UK edition of this one. Honestly, there's not much about the US version that I prefer over the UK one. I do think that adding the character falling from the door is effective and probably something that they could have included on the UK one to make it that much better, but I prefer everything else about the UK edition. I think that that is probably going to be gold foil. We have 3 doors on this one. This is the Book of Doors, not just door. And obviously on both covers, the staircase is made up of books, But I think if you didn't know that looking at the UK one, and it's obvious that it is made up of doors, so now that I look at the US one, I can tell that it's not so obvious. It's very subtly done on the US one, and I don't love that. And I just prefer the background and color choices on the UK one. That's an easy win for me, giving it to the UK. Another easy win for me, but this time it's for the US, is How You Get the Girl by Anita Kelly, which I read and loved. And I have loved all of the US covers in this series. I honestly didn't know that the UK had different covers until I was researching for this video, and I do not like the UK covers. I do like that the O and How is a basketball. I think that is cute, but I just don't like this illustration style, especially when you compare it to the US one, where you can tell that these characters, this illustration is really based on the description of the characters in the book. These are unique characters, really looks like how I imagine them. I love that we have the basketball court in the background. It's a subtle nod to the fact that this is a basketball romance without it being so obvious, where we have these two characters on the UK one on the basketball court holding hands. These could be anybody. There's nothing special about these characters. The balls in her court tagline is really sweet, but I gotta give it to the UK because I just love all of these covers, and you can tell that the artist put a lot of attention into making sure that they were accurately depicted in the story. So love that. Ava Reid has a new book coming out this year, and it's called Lady Macbeth, which is really exciting. And we have very different covers. And this is one that I think people are going to be divided on. I have a clear favorite, but I can see an argument why you would like the other one better. The US one is so creepy in the best way possible, with that character's eye staring into your soul. I just think it is so effective. It's hard to believe that that is an illustration because it's so well done, especially with that veil. I'm in awe of this artist, and I actually looked her up, followed her on Instagram. Her name's Elizabeth Waku, and this is her style. This is the kind of stuff she does. She was a perfect artist for this cover. Again, it's another one that has like a frame around it, which seems to be a theme in some of these covers this year, and something new and different, and I like it. I'm a sucker for hot pink. I love that Lady Macbeth is in hot pink, and then everything else is more subtle. I love this cover. I need it on my shelves today. And then the UK one, there's some interesting choices here that I like. I love that she has those braids and they're dipped in blood. I think that is really cool. I like that we have that throne in the middle there, and in the background we obviously have some kind of scene playing out. It's just an illustration style that isn't my favorite. It's more simple, and I think I could see a lot of people loving that. But when I look at it compared to the US one, it's not even close for me. I love the US one so much, one of my favorite covers of this year. And the more you look at it, the creepier it is, and it works, and I love it. So I gotta give it to the US. When I do my research for these videos, I come across a lot of fantasy where we get different covers in the US and the UK. It doesn't happen as much in other genres, sometimes in romance, like in How You Get the Girl, but not as much. But I did find a couple of thrillers here, and I think the last one is horror. So we're gonna talk about those. The first one is Murder Road by Simone St. James, who I adore. And these are giving very different vibes. For some reason, the US one gives me thriller, and the UK one is giving me horror. I think it's more of a thriller, but it could be a blend. I like the US one. I don't love either of them, to be honest with you, but I think that the red font was a good choice with the blood dripping down. You're getting the right vibe. I like the simple image of the headlights coming towards you, because if you read the synopsis, that's really what this book is about. They're on an isolated highway and a car is chasing them, so that really works for me. The UK one, it's not even on a road, is it? Maybe it is. It looks more like a forest. I mean, having that woman in the backdrop walking towards you is really creepy, but I just feel like it's kind of generic, and it's not really telling me what the book is about as much. And it says, if you see her, you'll be next. So now I'm confused. The marketing in both countries must be very different, because in the US, they're not telling you that it's anything paranormal, but if you know Simone St. James, it's gonna have paranormal elements or supernatural elements. That's just kind of what she does. And the UK version is kind of making that very clear here. So I don't know, interesting, but I have to give it to the US. I shared a couple of these with friends on Discord before I filmed this, and there's a divide on a lot of these. Nobody agreed 100% on any of them really, but this one in particular is causing some debate. So this is How You Solve Your Own Murder. The US one I actually like. Actually, I like both of these. The US one is just kind of familiar to me. There's something about it that makes me feel like this is what they're doing for a lot of murder mysteries lately. Something about this vibe. is not that special, though I do like the manner. I think it's well done, and I do like a ravens on here, and it is really effective as a whole. And I think that a lot of people will be drawn to that cover, and you look at that and you know instantly the vibe you're gonna get from that book. But there's something about the UK one that feels nostalgic. It feels like an 80s thriller, you know what I mean? Like something that would come in a mass market paperback back in the day, and you'd sit there and you'd read it in a day and it would be all destroyed on the spine and stuff. And I kind of love that about it, not gonna lie. I love that we're going back to some of the old school cover trends, and this is definitely the case. And I like the skull with the raven. Simple imagery, but the way that they've done the font, it's just so nostalgic. Let me know if you can feel that when you look at this too. And it has a tagline. It says, "Frances always said she'd be murdered. She was right." So I'm gonna give it to the UK myself, but let me know how you feel about it down below. And just like that, we're at the last book. This is The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry. Interesting little choices that the designer of the US cover made that I think are really effective, especially putting Christina Henry's name like that, so it looks like you're walking down the hallway again to add that depth. And they've gone more realistic with this cover where you're inside the house itself. I like the choice of font. It's giving horror to me, and there's just something about that cover that is different and intrigues me. The UK one, I think the red works. You really are drawn to that in terms of the red, but again, it's another book with just a house on the cover, and it's not telling me much. Obviously it's going to be a haunted house story, but there's nothing special or unique to me, and it's just not one that stands out or is doing anything different. As much as I think it's kind of cool, I'm gonna give it to the US. So now I have to go through and tally this, but my gut is telling me that the US won this one again, which is interesting. So let me go through and count. So I just tallied up the votes, and with a score of 8-6, the US has come out on top. And it's always such a close call. Every time I do these videos, no side blows the other side away. We are just so lucky to have so many talented cover artists out there. So again, I will link all of the cover artists I can find down below, and I will also leave a list of the book titles pinned in a comment down below that you can copy and paste. Put the emoji, the flag of the book cover that you prefer down below, and it'll just be fun to see how different we all are, because from my small sample size of friends in Discord, we all have very different opinions, which I think is what makes this video so much fun to do. I love when you all engage with me in the comments. And again, if you ever come across any you want me to feature in a video, send me a message on Instagram, Kristen Craze Books. And this was so much fun. I cannot wait for the next installment. I'm researching for it already, so I look forward to that. And thank you all for your support. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.